everybody. I can see so far that we have someone from Pan-Atlantic University, representation from Ashesi University. So let's keep it coming in the chats. So welcome once again. So we're pleased to have you for the inaugural Giving Voice to Values Africa Symposium in celebration of our GVV Africa course. So under this course, taken from the Giving Voice to Value framework created by Dr. Mary Gentile, but here is the case where it's been tailored specifically to the African context. So then we're here today to share with you how the Education Collaborative has embarked on a journey to create and design a course that would help in strengthening the taking ethical action among our institutions. So the course is centered on two core tenets, the principle of value-based leadership and ethical action. Through these concepts, I would challenge us to think about how we can develop leaders who identify guiding principles that they will always stand for, and how we can create conditions to empower others to do the right thing at all times. So in today's symposium, here's what you have the opportunity to achieve. So our panelists will share on the importance of capacity building for ethical action and value-based leadership among our future generation. We also have gathered here today to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the GVV Africa course, and you get to be a part of this celebration with us. So as we prepare for the panel discussion, we're going to start with a short video and get your thoughts on these issues surrounding taking ethical action. We'll then launch a short poll. So we will now go on to sharing our video.
When we first started, right after we had achieved accreditation and we needed to recruit students, we planned an advertising campaign and we worked with an advertising agency to get ads placed in a local newspaper. Now, the day came when we expected to see our ads showing in the newspaper, and they didn't. And so, of course, we asked, why are the ads not running? And initially, we got a response that said there's a technical problem with the paper. But a few days later, with the ads still not running, we got another message saying, actually, this technical problem would go away if you would be willing to pay a bribe to somebody at the paper. This was a shock to us. It went against our principles. We were not inclined to pay bribes. We're absolutely clear about that. But we were also concerned about two things. One, if we can't recruit students, if students don't know about us, then we don't have any applications, we can't start. Second, you don't want to get into a quarrel with a newspaper because they print with barrels of ink. They have very wide reach. And if they took a hostile posture towards us, then a lot of the news about Ashesi or the reporting about Ashesi might have a negative tone, which would damage us.
Thank you very much. So we've just seen an interesting video of Patrick Ewa, founder of Ashesi University, sharing an ethical dilemma that they faced when they were first starting out with Ashesi University. So my question to you right now is, if this was you, what would you do? So I'd really love to hear your responses. So feel free to raise your hand or share how you would tackle such a situation in the chat. So if you would like to share any response, just feel free to think through what you would do in this situation and raise your hand if you'd like to share. Okay, so we have Yao Kwache.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think if I was in a situation similar to Patrick's, I also would have stuck to my principles, primarily on the basis of, I don't think it's right to let yourself be twisted away from what you truly believe in. And also because it would then become a slippery slope, because if I was desperate enough to give in to the bribes, just how much more could I be extorted? But primarily, my concern would be, it makes sense for me if I want to build a university with a certain standard of principles and values and ethics to hold myself to that specific standard. And I think I might have also seen it as an opportunity to go about a different kind of strategy, because I probably would have said, okay, then instead of newspapers, we'll do Instagram adverts or something on Facebook or something along those lines. But yes, I would not have allowed myself to be bullied into making a bad decision, much like Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. And I'm glad you mentioned the Instagram strategy, because I can see here in the chats that we have contributions on certain actions that would be taken. So I see use social media instead. I'm also seeing I would try another newspaper or look for alternatives while being polite to the first one. So ensuring that we're not damaging the reputation with the original newspaper. Thank you so much for your reaction. So I will now move on to introducing our esteemed panel for today's discussion. So from Botho University, we have Aravinda Ram, Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor for Employability and Technology. Aravinda comes with 15 plus years of experience in implementing mission-critical enterprise resource planning systems and managing technology infrastructure at Botho University. Under her responsibility, Botho University has pioneered virtual internships for credit to students, which has led to international graduate placements and gaining recognition for infusing technology and delivering employability initiatives. And we have from Kepler College, we have Adriana Uwamahoro, a tutorial assistant lecturer, providing coaching and workshops for English communication skills. She's a dynamic and dedicated educational professional with 4 years of experience in education, curriculum design, and skills development, and has contributed to the Systems Change Program Employability Track of the Education Collaborative as a program assistant, empowering other higher education institutions to develop career services that prepare students and graduates for the workplace. So can we please show some appreciation to our panelists for today? You can react with the clapping emoji. Let's show our panelists some love for today, please. Thank you. So to kickstart our panel discussion, can you share with us what has been the driving force behind your interests surrounding ethical action and value-based leadership? So I'll start with you, Aravinda.
Good day, everybody, and thanks for logging in. Just to highlight what these terms actually mean, so we don't use them loosely, basically ethical action and value-based leadership. Ethical action is all about taking steps in a situation where something or someone is acting in contradiction to our core beliefs, that is our values. And value-based leadership is all about those who are in positions of influence to have the skills to take ethical action and ensure that they're leading by example, so that those around them also find the courage and feel empowered to act in congruence with their values. So as an individual, my interest in ethical action is to firstly ensure that I'm aware of my core beliefs, and secondly, that I have the ability to act in alignment of my values as much as possible. So as a member of Botho University, the organizational culture in itself is very much rooted in ethical action and value-based leadership. We really resonate with these terms because that's just how things are done here. And the culture also is established. So everyone is well aware that we will not operate in a manner that justifies unethical practices. We will not take shortcuts, even if it means that we achieve some of the goals we've set for ourselves quicker. It's very clear that we will not indulge in those practices. So ethical action and value-based leadership, these concepts allow individuals and organizations to become agents of positive change. And Aram, really, that is the driving force for my interest and Botho University's interest in both these topics.
Thank you so much for that, Aravinda. Over to you, Adriana.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I would share my motivation in ethical actions and value-based leadership. It started back in the days when I was working as a systems change program assistant at Kepler. So we did the research and we identified that ethical leadership is one of the cornerstones to ensure that our African society develop economically. So that's how we got the idea of starting out programs. Since at Kepler, we are fortunate as a higher learning institution, we have courses around ethics. So we're looking at giving back to our community. For instance, in our Rwandan curriculum, we don't really learn ethics, we learn it theoretically. So we thought, what can we give back as Kepler institution? how can we help our youngsters? So that's where we targeted youngsters, because basic education starts when you're young. So we saw that giving young kids, teenagers, an opportunity to have a hands-on opportunity of practicing ethics while they are still young will help them to grow ethically. So that's when my interest started, and we started now initiating some programs to help, especially young kids, teenagers, who are preparing to go for the tertiary studies or join the workplace. And that's where the motivation came.
Thank you so much. I'm loving that I'm hearing about the impacts that we're having to our younger generation as well. So before we get into the targeted panel discussion, I'm going to launch a poll. So you will see that there's an opportunity to take a poll that would ask you how you currently approach ethics or how you promote ethical action in your organization. So you should see that poll, and let's just take a pause to fill that poll. Thank you so much for the responses that are coming in. So based on the introduction into this panel discussion, so I'll start with you, Adriana. So let's speak a little bit about your experience at Kepler designing the value-based leadership program for students. Can you share that with us?
Yes. So at Kepler in 2023, we started out a value-based fellowship program. It was a program that targeted high school students. So we worked together with our neighboring high school students, where we invited 60 participants who went through our 3 weeks program. So the way it was designed in terms of curriculum, we provided them courseworks where they could work on assignments, go through the ethical dilemmas, practice group activities so that they learn from each other. So it was a changing program because students, they don't really get the opportunity to practice, to learn ethics while they are still young, while they are still in their pre-tertiary school. Then we thought it would be an opportunity for them to practice. So we had other instructors at Kepler who teach ethics at Kepler. They supported us throughout the program where we assigned each instructor a class they could teach. For instance, you can see here on this picture, these are the students, high school students who were involved in the program. As I mentioned, there were 60 students. They were trained for a timeline of 3 weeks. We taught them during the weekends because that's when students have time when they are not working on their homeworks. So that's how we designed it, so that we don't overwhelm them with our assignments, our quizzes. So we brought it to the weekend. So we taught them, as you can see, we have various instructors. So it was an opportunity for them. It wasn't just to impact youngsters, but also give an opportunity to our institution, our staff members, to volunteer for this cause. So they volunteered their time. It was a really long training because they could start at 9 and end at 12 p.m. So it was a long training. So they volunteered their time. They trained our students. It was even engaging, to engage young students. You can just tell them those theories. We also provided some engaging activities that are aligned with the content. It was a life-changing program, as many would say. As students, we gave them a survey at the end of the program where they shared with us their thoughts about the program, how it impacted them, and we received many feedback from them so that we can bring it back this year. So we are looking forward to hear from your suggestions, something we can incorporate in the program to make it even more impactful for these students.
Thank you so much for that, Adriana. And as Adriana has mentioned, it would be great to hear your contributions on the value-based leadership program in the chats, or we can come to it at the end of the discussion. And so I think, Adriana, I think it's interesting how you've been on the end of being a part of the execution of this program, whilst also transitioning on to someone who has taken the GVV Africa course. So can you share what that experience was like, and if you see any parallels as having taken the GVV Africa course whilst also having designed a value-based leadership program? Thank you.
So before designing this program, I hadn't yet taken the GVV course. So I got interested in the course when I joined the June convening. That's when I met physically the instructors of that course, and also hear from the testimonies from students, from associate students and alumni, and how it has impacted them. So I observed the curriculum, how it is designed, the way it impacted alumni. So I took the decision to also enroll for the course. And when I joined the course, it was a really well-designed course, which I actually learned from it. I'm going to apply some things in our program so that we can make it a very impactful program. So I learned, for instance, as I mentioned, our motivation is to give our fellows an opportunity to practice. Many of the times we just learn ethics in theory, but in the GVV we could have various exercises. Many of you who took the course know. For instance, we had the tale of two stories where we were asked to reflect on our own experience, where we faced like an ethical issue, and we decided to speak our values, to speak out. And then in a situation where we faced ethical issues, dilemmas, and then we decided not to speak up. So those kind of activities really encourage an individual to think back and reflect some of the weakness we have that makes us act unethically. So those are some of the activities I'm really looking forward to apply in our program, like young students, high school students, to practice beforehand, before they face those kinds of dilemmas.
Thank you so much for that, Adriana. And I can definitely agree and relate to the fact that we normally think about ethics from the theoretical perspective. So it's a really amazing opportunity to get to practice and see how best we can take action when we are faced with situations that conflict us. So I think that's a great opportunity to actually even bring up the poll results. So I think it's very interesting that our audience we have an overwhelming majority that has mentioned trainings as the avenue by which ethical action is encouraged in their organizations or institutions. So this is really great to know. So I'm going to use the opportunity to move towards Aravinda. So Aravinda, my first question to you is, upon reflection of these principles of ethical action and value-based leadership, can you share with us, as an executive leader, your experience with the GVV Africa course and its relevance in terms of executive leadership? Thank you.
I think it's very important that for those of us who are in positions of leadership, the point to remember is that others are watching and they're emulating what we are doing. So there is influence. Isn't there a saying that with great power comes great responsibility? So we need to really set the right examples, not just in thought or in concept, but by our action. So this giving voice to values, the course that even I undertook, it gives us the ability to champion ethical action and value-based leaderships. So the GVV course, it actually provides a 4-step process. I was just saying hi to Dina a little bit earlier because I know she's probably watching me and testing. So I'm hoping that I get some marks today. But the course provides you with a 4-step process, which is essentially to minimize the risk and to also increase our chances of success. So in summary, what is at stake for those who are getting involved with this unethical practice? And for myself, if I'm not doing anything about it, how am I justifying this? What are the reasons and the rationalizations that are being used? And then to use each of these to, reframe and formulate adequate responses and what knowledge, skills, and resources that I have so that I can find a better alternative. I'm just going to go back to what Adriana said. Most of the courses that you study about ethics and, value-based leadership or leadership in general are very theoretical and very conceptual. So the nice thing about GVV Africa is that it gives you a lot of practical approaches to implement this. So the courses also, there's a lot of case-based training, and there's role playing as well. So it provides a set of skills for taking ethical action. You move beyond ethical awareness and ethical analysis into ethical action. So knowing who to talk to, when and where to talk to, using our strengths to be effective, minimizing risks in the process. The course is very thought-provoking, and you can't really zip through it. You need that time to reflect. And actually, that's where the maximum learning happens. So I think I also found that a little bit challenging. You can't just race through it and finish it. You need to take the time for this course. But I think that's where the value comes in. And most importantly, for those in leadership positions, it helps us to think about our organizations and whether we have created an environment or a culture where not only us setting the example to take ethical action, have we empowered our teams, our colleagues to also feel like they can take action, they can share their concerns, they can find the courage to act in line with their core beliefs. I think that is very, very important. And for those in leadership positions who want to take the GVV Africa course, I think I would say these are the real highlights of for me after having taken the course.
Thank you so much, Aravinda. And I'm glad you make mention of the organizational perspective as well. But sometimes when we are looking at ethical action, particularly, there's a focus on the individual. But what about the organizational values? How is everyone in the team aligned as well? So I'm glad you make mention of that. So that brings me to the next question. So among the future generation, what are your thoughts on ethical training and pertinence to them? And why is it important to ensure that we have ethical training for our future generation?
From the poll, Iram, you saw that everybody said training is the major source. So I think training by itself seems to be the one that has max access and, max impact. And that's why ethical training seems to be the preferred mode in most institutions. Coming back to Botho University, we are in 5 countries and we also have distance learning students. So you can imagine the diversity of our student audience and the complexity of this training that we now have to offer to develop ethical learners. The non-negotiable here is that a Botho University student or a graduate has to be what we define as a socially responsible student. This is defined in our Botho graduate profile, which is the list of qualities that we want all our students to have. Basically, Botho students must make decisions and take ethical action with the best interest of society as a whole. We already have this in our Botho graduate profile, so it ties in neatly with this whole ethical training concept. But as a result of today's symposium, I did take the opportunity, Iram, to ask a few colleagues at Botho University on their thoughts on ethical training and its importance for students. And while they have not done the GVV Africa course, their answers were evidence that they were also thinking on very similar lines. So, for example, Dr. Strikenbulava, who's a very senior professor, mentioned that when students are taught how to deal with the dilemmas that they face, when they're asked to act in conflict with their values, they actually toughen up and they build a foundation for successful life. And then another member from our Namibia campus, Dr. Dino, said that especially for programs such as accounting, health, research, programs like our network security and computer forensics, you're developing hacking, but we reference it as saying ethical hacking. There's a clear compliance procedure. There are clear codes of conduct to adhere so that our students are using their academic knowledge, but they have a very clear moral compass. So they're using it for the intended purposes. And then again, our student services manager, Ms. Achumanila, said that while we are only recently aware of GVV, and thankfully we are, Botho University has always been using our Botho graduate profile, actually since 2009, to train our students to develop into these responsible and accountable citizens. And lastly, Dr. Jane, again, a very senior and I think a very key member of the Educa Lab as well, she mentioned that as universities, we have a captive audience and we have the opportunity to produce these kind of students who will lead to a peaceful society which is devoid of crimes and such societal vices. So if you'll allow me, I want to just go back to a few very specific examples at Botho University of this kind of ethical training item. Firstly, we have an academic honesty policy. We have a zero tolerance for plagiarism. As lifelong learners, you need to know where to give credit and you need to reference it properly. And I think that's a very, very important aspect where we support our students from first year to say that you can't just copy paste. You have to reference it properly. And we have a zero tolerance for it. All our research, again, research is a very, very key area where ethics come into play. And so we have a strict policy on research, and there's an institutional review board that mandates that everything follows ethical practices, especially if you're dealing with humans as subjects. I was reminded by the Vice Chancellor to say you cannot leave out AI in this conversation about ethics, right? And so we created a policy on usage of AI in 2023 when the whole world was exploding. And so our stance was to say, we're not going to fight it. We're going to use AI to challenge students to think critically. And we asked our lecturers that develop assignments, develop projects, develop evaluation mechanisms that are not threatened by AI, but rather they focus on using AI as input, and then students build upon that to critically evaluate and produce their output. So we're working in tandem with AI, not against it. And then recently with GVV itself, you know this, Iram, our student unions in Botswana and in Eswatini campus, they had a high-level introduction to the GVV Africa course, and we hopefully will be able to plan one for our student unions in Lesotho. Why is this important? When you're talking about leadership, it doesn't stick to only staff, right? We also have to think about student leaders in our communities. And then our students have also had the opportunity to share some of their experiences for developing these case studies for GVV Africa. I think there was a call out for that, and some Botho University students also had the opportunity. So we're very excited about that. And two of our senior management team, I think one is myself and there's also another professor, Dr. Abhishek. Both of us have completed the GVV Train the Trainers course. Why is all of this being done? Because we really resonate, we believe in this whole concept of ethical action and value-based leadership. And if there's a readily available course which is tailored for the African context, which is using examples from our environments, it really makes sense for us to utilize that.
Thank you so much, Aravinda. And I think one thing that I really picked away from that is the intersection between ethics in the classroom. Students are learning it regarding their different courses, but then how can we also train them in a way that they can deal with dilemmas that they face? So I think that's something that's very interesting, and thank you so much for that. So I think we've had a really great discussion so far, and I will now use this opportunity to allow our audience to engage with our panelists to ask any questions or to provide any contributions regarding this whole discussion. So I think we have one question. We have one question in the chat. So, okay, no, this is more of a contribution. So I'll read that out. So there is clearly a conflict of values. An individual's development of virtues is necessary in addressing these challenges. Other options can be explored. Another contribution that we have is ethics and values must be developed into a curriculum where learners from basic to tertiary institutions are taught. I believe this is an intentional approach to developing future leaders who are ethically sound and value-driven. Okay, thank you very much for that contribution. So, okay, we have a hand up. So, Kagenza, I hope I'm pronouncing your name well. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Yes, you did. Well done. My name is Kagenza. I'm from the African Leadership University in Kigali, Rwanda. Sorry, I'm tuning in from not from my office, but you'll bear with me. First, just to say thank you very much for the insights. Really inspired. I was drawn to this event because Africa Leadership University, our mission is to raise ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. So ethics is always a conversation where we're coming from. I had two questions and a few insights. I'll try to be quick. The first question for Aravinda Ram. in Africa, there's a famous theologian from Kenya who said Africans are energetically spiritual beings. Everything we do, spirituality is tied to it. You're walking to work, you trip and fall, you say, someone is cursing me, those type of things. So what role have you found faith-based institutions or just generally religion does it play in terms of imparting ethics and values? I'm curious because the numbers of Africans who are tied to one or two religions is extremely high. You can't divorce spirituality from talking about ethics and values. And then my question for Adriana, thank you so much. I teach a class called Africa's Leaders. One of the assignments we do is to develop a 5-year leadership development plan for our students. It's based on 3 things: character, competence, chemistry. And so character, of course, captures the values and the ethics. One of the challenges I get to hear from students a lot is the lack of mentors, mentorship. They can't access them. The people they look up to are not available. Or the people they looked up to, they realize do not really live up to the values or the ethics that they thought they did. How are you dealing with this issue of connecting students to mentors? Because I believe leaders need to share more of their life, not just the theory, not just teaching. But for example, a young student at ALU, I know is going to maybe get married, they're dating, young people in college, relationships are a big part of their life. So, I try to also touch on some of those things because they don't have enough models. How does ethics and values play out in relationships, for instance, in relational competencies? So those are a few things. Maybe the last question also for Aravinda and Adriana, you talked about internships. Are you finding that internships are offering students good opportunity to stretch and practice their values? Or is it just something they do to tick the box? All right, I need to do an internship for my school. That's it. Or are they really meaningful experiences? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Kagenza. I think what you mentioned is actually something that we do touch upon in the GVV Africa course, this whole concept about religion and faith. It's actually very explicitly mentioned there. I'm going to touch to that element from the course because there are these things that are called as enablers and disablers, right? So what is an enabler? An enabler is something that supports your choice to speak or act on your values. And a disabler is actually the opposite. So it inhibits you just from speaking up. Now, we all could belong to the same religion. We could be siblings that were brought up by the same parents, but we could choose to voice our values very differently. One may choose to speak up and one may choose not to. So this is why when we are given in the course, we're given a list of enablers and disablers to consider and think about, but their religion really does not play a very big role because, for the reasons that I just stated, to say that it's not really considered. In essence, you are expected and rather required to think about yourself, your own preferences, your experiences, the context in which perhaps the unethical practice or the dilemma that you're facing in, and then evaluate your action that you're going to take. So when it comes to faith-based organizations, etc., there are mass churches, etc., with huge number of people who are following. But even though they may be prescribed by their faith and their religion and their spiritual practice to do and act in a certain way, individuals may choose to actually act completely differently. And that is something that is influenced by enablers such as, your friendship, your age. In certain, in Africa, there's a big deference to age, right? Like you will not question your elders, even if they are asking you to do something. Your boss may call you and say that you need to do X, Y, and Z. You may not agree, but will you find the courage to say, no, this is in conflict with my values? And so should I actually voice it in a manner? Perhaps I can speak to a colleague because of my agency to say, is this how this should be done? Do you think I can express it in a certain form or manner that will allow me to not be in conflict with my values? So there are these enablers, and the awareness of these enablers and disablers actually then allows you to act in congruence with your values. And that's what the GVV Africa course I found very useful to say. There's a lot of rationalizations that we use as well. This is how things are done here. Nobody will notice. It's just a small thing. It's just one time. I think these are some of the very practical elements of the GVV Africa course, because all of us face these dilemmas. What it tells you is, what are these enablers, disablers, these reasons and rationalizations? And then there is that 4-step process that I alluded to earlier on how you can take ethical action. So I don't know if Kagenza, that kind of helped you. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Adriana. I guess the second question was for her.
Yes, thank you so much, Aravinda. To answer his question as well, we also had the same similar thought like yours for students whom we wanted to train. Where would they find mentors, like elder people who will be guiding them after we release them from the program? So that's when we thought about also training their teachers. So we trained students as well as their teachers, so that teachers can learn how to incorporate ethics in their curriculum, always reminding them about maybe, let's say, after learning sciences, relating sciences to ethics, how might they encounter ethical issues regarding that field. So that's when we thought also about training teachers. We trained them, but it was more of training the trainer to train them how they can teach students how to behave ethically once we release them from the program. So that's one insight. We thought about training as well, their mentors, their teachers, people they look after too. But what if, let's say, maybe we didn't get the opportunity to teach their parents? Parents might be mentors for some students. We didn't get the opportunity to teach every elder who might be in touch with those kids. So we also, I think there is one insight that would help you. It was from the GVV. I got the idea from GVV as well. So teaching them how to pass through the 4 steps of voicing your value. So there is one step where you have to learn how to formulate a persuasive response, because GVV encourages us to always involve other people. Sometimes you might face those ethical issues and elders are opposing you. They are not also following the values. So learning how to formulate a persuasive response is one thing I would advise you to teach your students. There are 4 steps. First of all, they have to identify what is at stake. And after that, they also have to identify reasons and rationalizations, as Aravinda mentioned. So there are different excuses that people use. They might also find those excuses among their mentors themselves. So being able to identify those reasons, rationalizations that are used, it's something they really need to learn, and also how to formulate a persuasive response. Sometimes you might be facing an adult, and as a young person, you might be scared to oppose your elder. So learning how to respectfully, politely persuade someone, that's one element I believe would help you with your students. And lastly, they also have to identify the levels that they can use to influence their surrounding. Since, for instance, taking an example, if their mentor is the one who is not following up with the values, is the one who is caught up in ethical issues, ensuring that they learn how they can influence their elders. That's one other element I would advise from the GVV course.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Adriana and Aravinda. So I think we have another question here in the chat, so I'll just read that out. So from Adira, it's always consoling for me to see many persons and institutions invested in the ethical education of the younger generation. Thank you for all you do. I would like to ask both panelists, to comment about their experiences with students who tend to cheating in exams or other assessments to be successful. What do your institutions currently do? And what more can we do individually and institutionally? So I think we could start. Aravinda, would you want to start?
I don't know, Iram, don't you want to mention the HSE honored code? That's what actually brought me to GVV Africa, because like Adriana said, I attended a session at the June convening where they were talking about exams that are run without invigilators, where there's almost like a community code of conduct, and which is enforced upon the students to say, you all understand that this is unethical, and so everybody adheres to it. And I was like, do you actually do this? Are you able to practically implement this? And are you telling me that it works for you? So I think that whole concept was so, it was something that I really couldn't believe that could be put into action. And the first thing I did was I also handled the assessments at our institution along with my teams. And I asked them, do you think something like this could work for our students? The response surprisingly was that it wasn't a hard no. Everybody then was like, if we could guide our students better, right? If they didn't arrive at university so blank about ethical and ethical practices, a lot of them arrive at university, and I can see there are comments here to say, catch them young, which is what Adriana is also doing. I don't think we can blame them for the ignorance on the topic, because probably nobody has ever guided them before. So when they arrive at university, the fact that they should also copy paste other people's work, this whole academic dishonesty in practice that we see, it's not because they probably want to do it, they don't know better. And so the team told me that if we could find a way to impart this kind of knowledge and train them, maybe we can't do it today, but definitely somewhere in the near future, we probably could pilot something like this. Remember that we are also not operating in isolation. So if we as an institution in a very regulated market now suddenly say there are no invigilators in our classrooms, and we then put out those results, our regulator is also going to come to us and say, hang on, what is the authenticity and integrity of your evaluation, right? So it's not just us that needs to make this happen. I think we need to also involve everybody to say, it's not just Botho and our students and something that happens within our four walls. It's something that everybody needs to buy into as a society, as a whole ecosystem of education. And what if we can collectively pilot this together and see if it can work, right? So I think GVV is not just for us as Botho or as students. I would love for some regulators also to join this, right? I would love for some sponsors to join this, for some parents to join this, and really talk about these things much earlier, much wider, so that the responsibility and the impetus does not just lie with us as lecturers in the classroom or as administrators or at student services offices, etc. So yeah, I thought I should just mention that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Adriana, would you like to?
Yes, I would add on something that we do in our institution to help our students, our staff, to be involved in acting ethically, ethical actions. So it's giving them those opportunities to volunteer, for them to practice. For instance, through this value-based leadership program, we recruited various staff members. We also involved our students. Our students were the main instructors for this course. We gave them the opportunity to go through the curriculum, teach what they already know about the theories, designing the quizzes, the scenarios that are related to ethical issues, giving them that opportunity to practice through volunteerism. And also, I saw a question from Washington about how we measure the success of teaching high school students. One of the way we used when designing the program, so we established some metrics where we tested their knowledge prior to the program, and also we tested their knowledge after the program to see how far they came in terms of understanding the content. So we gave them a pre-test to see how far, like what they already know regarding ethical issues, ethical leadership, and then we gave them an ending test, an exit ticket. So there we were able to see the impact. And also we gave them quizzes, assignments throughout the program, where we could see how they are scoring, how they are progressing through the program. So we ensured that even though it's an informal lesson, we still incorporated all those elements, metrical elements that helped us to identify if really the program was impacting them.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the responses. And I'm glad that as we're discussing this issue, we're also looking beyond the students who are directly experiencing the benefits of these ethical training programs. We're also thinking about those that are administrating that kind of training. And so also just to also mention thinking beyond the ecosystem of education as well. What about sponsors? What about people in industry? How can they also support in creating impact, especially regarding taking ethical action? So I'm glad that that's coming up in this conversation. So I think we have another question. Adriana, you addressed Professor Washington's question. So I think I would read out this question I would say it's to Aravinda. So it says, I'm interested in learning how the academic honesty policy works, especially with the use for AI, where students who are expected to use AI merely to guide their answers end up using it for more than 50% of their content. So I think that's the question is centered around.
Yeah, so I want to take that up because we are having some interesting debates in the education fraternity about AI. A lot of us actually took the initiative to create a policy for AI usage. We did this last year because we were like, we use a lot of tools for plagiarism detection. Actually, we use Turnitin, and Turnitin by itself, it's a plagiarism detecting software. It created a component where it allows you to measure the usage of AI percentage. So one measure was to just take that metric and say, if it goes beyond a certain point, then, you would be penalized because the software provides that kind of a feature. But then we also started looking around for other institutions across the world as to how they were doing this. And then there was this whole idea of saying that change your referencing mechanism. So when you are doing academic referencing, not only do you need to mention your sources. Firstly, we stated that our academic board came up with these policies. I'm just narrating them to say that, firstly, are you allowing AI in this assignment or are you not allowing AI? If AI is allowed, then you need to change. And they came up with some benchmarks as to how to reference AI tools. And what I remember, one of the features of that referencing is to say you need to mention the prompts that you gave to the AI tool in your referencing. So to say that I typed this, I think there is a whole concept on prompt engineering as well that has developed as a result of these AI-based chatbots. And so you have to provide the prompts in your referencing so that we can see what you fed into these AI bots to get the answers that you got. There was also a lot of focus on our lecturers. I think they felt the heat the most to say that no longer can you just give them assignments that say, what is this? Or, questions which are like simple, what is the meaning of this, or definition-based answers, etc. You need to now make sure that your questions are more about the application, use more simulation tools, etc., more project-based assignments, right? And so this involved us also training our staff on the usage of AI and the benefits of harnessing these AI tools in their evaluation mechanisms. That's what I mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of work. Now, recently, the plagiarism detection software, the AI feature has gone behind a paywall. And now the latest debate is to say, do you want to pay for this feature? Because now the academic community is discussing to say this feature is not as effective. All I'm trying to say here is that as the stance and the policies on AI, it's very hard to fix them right now simply because it's changing so rapidly. And slowly everybody is starting to say that AI has gone beyond a point where you can actually even detect that it's being used. So there's no point penalizing students on AI percentage usage. What we now need to aggressively do is to really change our our assessment mechanisms and make them like open book, completely project based, submission based, project, dissertation based, so that we are not caught in this debate and are not changing our stance every day. We've moved even beyond that. So I think that is what I would like to mention, if that was helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful to me. I think that's a really interesting and unique perspective regarding AI. There's usually this focus on, okay, you use AI, that's bad. So it's really lovely to also hear this perspective. So I think there's another question in the chat for you, Aravinda. So this question is, a popular vein of thought is that students tend to follow the example of their peers. So regarding the no tolerance policy on plagiarism that you mentioned, I'm wondering your thoughts on the effectiveness of peer guides, models for students to emulate instead of rules from staff and superiors.
Yeah, so I think the honor code and the code of ethics, we took a leaf out of HSC's honor code as well, and we implemented that last year, where we put it out there on every mark sheet, on every submission, to say that I understand that these are the things that I should and shouldn't be doing. We developed a whole code of conduct. We had it, but it was sitting outside. So we brought it into the whole, assessment documentation that they need to submit, just to say that at least by looking at it continuously, you reinforce that concept in your mind. Now, whether it's something that you don't need to check, that's going to take some time. So we did that. We put it into the cover sheet of our marking scripts. We put it onto our Blackboard learning management system as something that everybody has to take. And every time you submit something, that thing is going to come up and you're going to have to take it. So eventually you're going to have to read it and you're going to have to imbibe it. So I think that was one very practical way in which we did it. The use of peer models and the use of role models, well, we would love that. I mean, didn't I say that we would love to get to a stage where nobody is enforcing everything? All of us are acting completely in line with our values, whether somebody is looking or not, right? That's the stage that we want to get to. And so I think that's where the element of training and continuous positive reinforcement comes in. When somebody is doing something right, put them up in front, not only congratulate them, but help them in your agenda to enroll others. I don't know, it sounds like the whole faith-based aspect that Kagenza was saying, build a cult of, ethical leaders, if you so must. And so I would really take that point and say, perhaps we need to do more in bringing these kind of role models to work along with us as administrators in building a whole student generation of, ethical practicing learners.
Thank you so much for that, Aravinda. So I think there was a hand up. So that was from Dr. Lois. So Dr. Lois, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was nice. I'm just curious, as far as congratulating or making that student happy or person happy or after practicing ethical, how will you sensitize to ensure that they continue practicing, doing ethical practice every now and then without being forced, without being even sensitized, without being recognized? How will you make sure it is part of them? Thank you. Over to you.
Yes, that's a very good question. The way we did it, we could give them homeworks. Okay, we provide them homeworks. We assign them an activity they could do at home to ensure that after the program, they are also engaged with the content, giving them some homeworks and also teaching them about accountability, encouraging them to own their learning, and also ensuring that we explain to them the reason for the training, for them to understand why. Why are we learning ethical leadership? Why are we teaching them to learn how to tackle ethical conflicts? Ensuring that they are really engaged within the program. a few students from the school. They were delegated to come join the program. So in that instance, students who attended, they had a purpose. They already knew the objective, why they are coming for this program, and we had prepped them to let them know what the program is about. And we made sure that they are really engaged. They know the purpose of the program, they know the reason and the benefits, so that they can be at the same page. And ensuring the activities we give them, they're not only just in class, they're also some homeworks they could take home, some prompts, maybe giving them a scenario to engage with parents, asking their families what they think about that kind of issue, so that they can gather outside information, so that they remain engaged, not only in class, but after the program. And one thing we also did that I think would be helpful for my colleagues here who are also looking to implement the same, at the end of the program, giving them like a survey, a very small survey, it helped us to identify how the program could impact in the long run. Giving them a survey to ask them what they think maybe how the program impacted them, maybe ranking themselves from a range from 1 to 10, how they believe they improved. So hearing from their own insight on how they believe the program impacted them, and asking them some questions, maybe if they can recommend the course, the program to someone else, if they're willing to take an advanced program for next year. So ensuring that we gather those data that help us to project the long-term run of this program.
Thank you so much, Adriana. I think I'm glad you mentioned the survey and the avenues that you use to take impact and make sure that you're taking feedback on the effectiveness of the program. So Aravinda, would you like to go next?
No, I think Adriana answered it. I think that's fine.
Okay, awesome. So I think, Adriana, then I'll just ask one last question that's in the chat for you, which relates to the feedback process. So Professor Washington is asking if you can kindly comment on whether you also do tracer studies to establish long-term change or the effects of the training beyond the classroom.
Yes, that's a very good question that I would actually say it's a suggestion for us. So what I mentioned about the survey, so we identified that it's not enough to ensure that students are applying what they learned throughout their lives since we are no longer together. So we were thinking incorporating some additional tasks like following up with them, calling them to ask how far were they able to apply the knowledge? Are they having any challenges? Would they really want us to join back to their schools, to mentor them, to do some kind of revision? So that's something we thought that we could incorporate, improve on for the next program, so that we ensure that the program continues. What they learn, they continue to apply it after they join back to their workplaces, for those who already joined the workplace, for those who joined their tertiary studies, to ensure that the program impacted them for a long run. Yeah, so that's a good suggestion that we also thought could be improved on.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So I will now ask if our panelists have any closing remarks or any closing reflections.
Yeah, thanks, Iram. I think for ethical action and value-based leadership, again, going back to the point that there's a lot of talk about this conceptually, and that for us to be able to actually execute, we need to know how to do that using a very tangible set of skills, a very tangible set of tools. And I think one of the nice things about the GVV Africa course was that it provides exactly that. In fact, in the introduction to the GVV course, it actually says that we want to go beyond just the first two steps, which is awareness and analysis. We want to target the action bit. And that's why this course was designed. So I think once we take the course and then we actually go through the case studies, etc. They're not easy again, but they're extremely impactful, because then you start realizing that perhaps what you thought were your core values may not be the case. You may come up with a completely different list. You may also realize that many of the things that we allow for in our teams, in our departments, and in our organizations to say, the common rationalizations that everybody uses are probably some things that we need to really champion, to cut down, to dismiss, actively tell our teams and educate them to say that don't fall, prey to these. You are allowed to question them, and to really establish a culture where nobody feels like there's going to be punitive action against them for speaking up. Right. I think that's very, very important as leaders of organizations, that we foster. I think Dr. Patrick Auer mentioned this, to say that there was a very interesting thing he said, writing up a failure report and then having conversations to say, don't penalize the ones when they report that there's been a problem, rather reward those who have taken action to correct it. I think that was very, very nicely presented. And so that's something that I feel all of us in our organizations can implement. Reward those who report something. Obviously, set in place mechanisms to minimize these failures. You should have done that prior. But if after that there are still challenges, then you need to have a listening approach, and you need to allow for people to share, and then you can take the corrective action. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you so much, Aravinda. Adriana, your closing.
Yes, to add on to what Aravinda said, I would also encourage everyone here to invest in training youngsters, because those pre-tertiary students are the ones who will join our institutions. They're the ones whom we will be working with in coming years. So investing in training them, sharing the knowledge we have, encouraging them to speak up, preparing them for ethical issues they might face. So that's one thing I would encourage. It's very rewarding seeing some young students learning some of the skills that we didn't get an opportunity to learn when we were still young. And I'd really encourage everyone to go through the GVV program. It's a very good program. Aravinda said you can't really take the course if you are not prepared and dedicated to go through the program. It's a very good program that helps you reflect. It helps you reflect back and you apply. It's a practical program. I would really encourage everyone to take it. They provide exercises that are tailored to African context. That's one thing I appreciated from the program. It's tailored to our African context, African beliefs. Many of the articles we normally use, they are tailored to Western culture. Scenarios are from Western people. So this program, they give us practical exercises, even some animated resources that are very engaging, which I believe would be a baseline for us to train ourselves, how we can mentor our students, how we can also support in our daily lives, how we can act ethically when we face those kinds of dilemmas.
Thank you so much. So I would want to say thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for making the time and for shedding more light on this conversation around ethical action and value-based leadership. I personally have learned so much, and I'm grateful to have seen the perspective from the institutional high level, and also seeing it from the perspective of making sure that we encourage young pre-tertiary students, just to also bring them into making and really seeing that ethical change. So I'm very, very excited about this conversation that we've had today. And so I would actually like to now use this opportunity to have all of us see the impacts that we've had with the GVV Africa course. We've had this opportunity to bring a course that empowers individuals to speak up for their values. And we have an innovative approach where we get to train others to also help other people champion taking ethical action and actually speaking up to their values when they face ethical dilemmas. So since the course inception, we've had 145 course participants. We've been able to conduct workshops across various institutions, and so the number is over 400. And we've been able to have over 50 course completions in relation to the course enrollment, and a total of 12 higher education institutions that have been impacted as well. But the interesting and dynamic thing about the GVV Africa course is it goes beyond higher education institutions. We've had industry representatives. So we've had representation from the banking industry, from healthcare, that have also been involved in taking up this course. Because at the end of the day, despite the industry, despite the field that we may find ourselves in, we may all, and that's one core thing about GVV Africa, it is 100% certain that we would face a situation where someone will put us in a situation that conflicts with our values. So how do we take an approach that would help us speak up in those situations? So over here, we can see the geographical representation of our course participants. So the majority of representation comes from Western Africa, but would love to have a lot more of us engaged in the course and increase our representation as well. So with this opportunity to ensure broader and deeper reach, we are pleased to share with you two other projects that we have in development. So we have our GVV Africa for University Students project that will be used to support campus-wide ethical training for students, and then GVV Africa in French, which will not only be a translation, but would also be adapted to the Francophone context, just to ensure that we have a deeper reach and everyone can be a part of this training to empower others to take ethical action, especially when we face value conflict situations. So it is at this point that I would like to say thank you so much for being a part of this celebration of our GVV Africa course. So in the chat, you will see the opportunity, you will see that there'll be a link, an evaluation link for this symposium event, and a link to sign up if you're interested in enrolling in this course. So I would like to ask if we can all start our videos so we can take a group picture just to commemorate this celebration.
Okay, so I'm going to count down to 1 and we'll take a quick group photo. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, cheese. Please smile. Oh.
And once again, thank you so much, Aravinda. Thank you so much, Adriana, for making the time for this discussion. And thank you to our participants for celebrating with us on our 1 year of impacts with the GVV Africa course. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram, for organizing this. Congratulations on all your efforts.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you so much. It's been a great event.
Thank you very much. Bye. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.